Welcome back to Our Community. Susie Thomas visiting with John Ruhlin, the founder of Ruhlin Group. And really, it's phenomenal, as you were telling me, some of the people who you have been asked to come share these very basic biblical principles with. How did that happen? Connect the dots. How does a young guy who's selling knives go before, these
Kings?
Fortune 500? Yeah, go before kings and teach them what they need to know.
Well, I think a big part of it is we realize that the best way to teach people is to model the practice. And so it started out sending one gift a week to when I'd sit down with a CEO or an executive. Most of the time people want to send a gift after a referral. They want to send a gift after you've done business. I would thank them for their time. So I sit down with somebody, I get 30 minutes of their time. It's the CEO of an insurance company. At the time, all we had was Cutco. And still to this day, 80% of our gifts that I send out are something kitchen related because breaking bread, the Last Supper, like there's a reason it was the Last Supper. It's like people want to connect over food and the kitchen is your intimate setting. So I would sit down with somebody and I would send them a handwritten note with let's say a carving set, and I'd find out their spouse's name and engrave that on there. And I'd say, thanks so much for carving out the time. I really appreciate it.
Carving out the time.
And I would thank them for their time, which in 2016 or 2000, doesn't matter the year, is our most precious asset. Most of the time people want to pick your brain. They want to waste your time. And so when I would sit down with somebody and I get, their time's worth hundreds of dollars an hour, sometimes thousands, I would acknowledge them for their time. And they're like, you're not asking me for a referral. You're not asking me for business. You're just thanking me for my time. What's the catch? And I'm like, there's no catch. This is what I'm teaching. This is what I think is important. And they would be like, I've never had anybody thank me for a 30-minute coffee with a $200 gift.
Wow, yeah.
It freaked them out.
I'm quite sure that's true.
And so they would come back, and so sometimes I would run into them 6 months later. Sometimes it'd be 6 years later. But we started to get like traction with people saying, I want people to feel. I want my inner circle, my employees, my clients, my suppliers, my board of directors, I want them to feel the same way I felt when you thanked me and didn't ask for anything and just acknowledge my time. And so we started to get people that would say, I had no business sitting down with. I'd get the time with them. I thank them for their time, and they'd say, come into this group with me. And now there's 100 of these people in this room.
Wow. Yeah.
And they'd say, tell them what you do. And I'm like, okay. I'd share, and they'd be like, so you're a gift strategist, you're a gift guru, and I'm like, yeah, I guess I am.
Never called myself that before, but okay.
Yeah. And so a lot of it was just every time I would get time with somebody, I would thank them for their time, I'd honor them for their time, I would model the practice, and now we're at a point now where we send out a couple $100,000 a year worth of gifts, asking nothing in return, and it just keeps multiplying the impact and the doors that open with, like we landed the Cubs last year. I mean, the Cubs are one of the hot, and we were able to take,
hot teams this year.
We took parts of their locker room wood and built speakers out of it for their 400 most important relationships. So we're taking a piece of history and building it into the gift for them to give out. So
you give away, say again, how many hundreds of thousands of dollars?
A couple $100,000
a year in gifts. That's a very interesting business model, John.
I know it's and here and the kicker is, obviously, like from a faith perspective, I love celebrating Christmas, but a lot of what we teach is avoiding times of the year like Christmas. Like
when there's so many.
I think about the average person. They're receiving things. They're stressed out. And so I'm like, a gifting company doesn't send out one dime of gifts between Thanksgiving and Christmas.
That's interesting.
And they're like, we've been doing it for 40 years. And I'm like, well,
Stop,
because people are eating themselves to death. They're stressed out. They're receiving so many things. What if you just loved on somebody in the middle of July?
Yeah.
What would that, like, you think that would surprise them? They're like, yeah. I'm like, well, you want an ROI you want people to be wowed by your gift and your generosity? Do it at times when it's not expected. Don't give gifts out of obligation. Give gifts just because, not because it's necessary, not because you have to. Do it because you want to. And all of a sudden, that comes through the gift. Like when you get a gift and it's like a just because, the impact is 1,000% higher.
Yeah.
And so so we do send out a lot of gifts, and I call it planned randomness. I'll do gifts for Valentine's Day, then the next year I do it for St. Patrick's Day, then the next year I do it for Memorial Day. We send gifts probably about 4 times a year to our 250 most important relationships.
I love that planned randomness.
It's a mouthful. Planned randomness.
You are coming up with some very interesting bullet points here, and you're on the radar of yet another Ohio boy married John Maxwell. How did that
Yeah.
relationship start?
Yeah, well, ironically enough, I was at Malone. One of the gals that I was good friends with, Andrea Cerna, one of her fiance was one of my best friends, Jared Brunk, and they moved to Florida, which is where he was living, and she started working for this guy. And she was bragging on him, like how great a place it was culture-wise. And so I sent him a gift saying, thanks so much for taking care of one of my close friends. No strings attached. It blew him away. It was a couple knives, his name, spouse's name, his logo, handwritten note. And he's like, next time you come to Florida, I want to go to lunch with you. So we sit down, we hit it off. Well, he ends up becoming John Maxwell's business partner in the John Maxwell coaching companies.
Oh, my.
So when they are taking the picture of their first 7-figure check from starting the company, Scott reached out and said, hey, I want to do something nice for John and for a couple of our partners. And so we did the knives, and John was blown away. And then he started to plant seeds about, hey, what if we did some sort of partnership? And so we ended up starting to do the gifting for Equip at some of their Pebble Beach events and some of their, and I got to speak on the same stage as John at that Pebble Beach event, talking about what I'm teaching, which is how to be radically generous in your business and how that can be, if you do it right, a competitive advantage in business.
Wow.
And so we don't do all of their gifting, but Mark Cole has become a friend, their CEO, and Scott, Scott Fay from TC Irrigation. He still owns the landscaping company, but he's still a partner with Maxwell. That he continues to look for ways to plug us into the various Maxwell entities. So
speaking with John Ruhlin, he is the author of Giftology and founder of the Ruhlin Group. So walk us through, we've got in our closing minutes here, walk us through the basic principles. I know what everyone needs to do is go get this book and read it.
Yeah.
But can you share some of these principles with John as you're speaking? Sound to me that they are absolutely as important in our personal lives as they are in business.
Yeah, I think the beautiful thing is we hired a PhD from Wharton to do the research on the history of gifting. Like, gifting is not just a U.S. thing. Like, you go to China, gifting's important. You go to Africa, like, gifting represents who you are as a person, your family. It kind of goes back to that artifact nature of gifting's really important. So we wanted to, I didn't want it to just be anecdotal, like, hey, I did this and this is what happened, or here's the doors that opened. I wanted it to be based in science and based in research. And so I had that the core of like why it matters. And then once you know it matters, now what do you do? And so we kind of lay out like, here's 10 questions you really, need to ask yourself. If you want to be world class at this, whether it's in your personal life, like with your spouse, most people make the gift about themselves. They don't plan accordingly. They don't, they say it's the thought that counts. Well, I say it's not the thought that counts. It's the thoughtful thought that counts.
Oh, that's good.
Because a lot of people want to just check a box and they want to give flowers on Valentine's Day, or they want to give something on the birthday. Well, what about a just because in the middle of, March gift? Mm-hmm. That's like in your own interpersonal relationships, that's when it means the most. And so really what we walk through is those simple questions, and then give real kind of simple answers on what you should be thinking about when you want to love on, whether it's your board of directors, whether it's your spouse. We're all people. And that's the beautiful thing about, like, why the Bible's eternal. Like, he understands that we're all wired a certain way, whether you live in Africa or whether you live in Canton, Ohio. And we're just we've aggregated a lot of that thought process and put it into a simple to read book.
What is it about giving that is so nurturing to the giver? When I think about going to poverty-stricken areas, the thing that you notice is these people are so very generous, whatever they have, and by our standards, they don't have very much.
Yep.
But they are so very giving. What is it about it that we have this need to be able to be giving? Is this because it's so much the nature of God?
I think it's, I mean, we serve a generous God,
yes,
and we're made in His likeness. And I think there is, the Bible talks about being a joyful giver and how that should be the case. It should be fun. And what I found, at least for me, the more I do it, I don't want to say it's addictive, but it's like
it's intoxicating.
It is intoxicating because I don't know. There's spiritually, like, reciprocity. We're wired for reciprocity.
Yeah.
We're wired to be in community together. We're wired to need each other. And I think that we're wired to want to be generous with one another because God's generous, with us. And so it's,
I'm hearing what you're saying. And some people find it hard to receive. Have you ever come across those kinds of people?
For sure.
It's difficult for them to be on the receiving end of a nice gift.
Yeah, I think if you're a good giver, oftentimes, being a gracious receiver is part of being a good giver and being able to accept. I think our ego can sometimes get in the way of things. I think one of the guys that's a friend of ours, just wrote the Ego is the Enemy book, and I think that ego gets in the way of a lot of things in business, and I think gifting is definitely one of those things, of being able to be a great receiver of things. It's definitely, it should be a two-way street, no question.
It took you how long to pull all this together into this book, Giftology?
I've been thinking about it. People started pushing us maybe 10 years ago, like, you should really write a book, and I'm like, really? Guy from Delroy, Ohio? Seriously, it just didn't resonate. And then 5 years ago, I said, you know what? These principles do resonate, but I ended up hiring a company to help me with the process of publishing and whatever else. Started a company out of Austin called Book in a Box, because getting your ideas out onto paper in a thoughtful way. I didn't want it to be just a vanity book. I wanted it to be a book that would actually help people. People are like, oh, business, book is like a business card. I'm like, no, I want it to be like my entire business wrapped up in the book. And so I would say in the last year, it all kind of with their help, I was able to get really crystal clear. And I think the more times I've spoken and we started to write for Forbes and Inc. and some of these other articles.
Say that again. You started to write for Forbes and Inc.
Yeah, we started to write for some of the some bigger business publications. It started to bring clarity. It's like the more you teach, you have to, in order to teach something, you have to know it really, really well. And the more I wrote about it, the more oh, I should say it this way, or oh, that really resonates, or oh, that's not clear. I think going through the process of sharing the message made the book. If I would have published it 5 years ago, it would have been an okay book. But I think it's way better now because of what's transpired in the last 18 months.
Certainly, this seems to be the time for sure. How do we get it, John?
You can go to Amazon is the easiest way. You can get the Kindle or get the paperback. You can also go to Giftology book and then kind of learn a little bit more about it. I talk about the book and you can see who's kind of endorsing it. Giftologybook.com, or go right to Amazon and just type in Giftology. It'll pop. It's the first thing that pops up.
Do you have a website other than giftologybook.com?
I do. Yeah, Ruhlin Group. So RUHLIN Group.com is the core for all of our businesses, and then we're relaunching here next month. John Ruhlin. Some of the speaking engagements and stuff we've started edit some of the sizzle reels and all that kind of stuff that'll go live late July. But yeah, Ruhlin Group, RuhlinGroup.com right now is the main one.
Awesome. John Ruhlin, author of Giftology. Be sure you go get that right now. Seriously, stop what you're doing and go get it right now. Thank you so much for joining us on Our Community.
Thanks for having me, Susie. This has been awesome.